Hello, Galaxy. I'm Chris Perillo, and you're watching the Locker Room Daily Report, or TLDR for short. I have talked about 10 things I love or like about the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and now I'm going to talk about 10 things I don't like or hate about the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And let me tell you, it was a lot easier to make this list than the other one, so keep in mind, I've done 2 separate videos being as balanced as I possibly could with my perspectives, given that I've had just this one experience. This is after using the iPhone for a day, after having been an iPhone user pretty much from the beginning of iPhones, and loving, or at least once loving the iPhone. I fell out of love with it, not because of the hardware, but because of the software. So the first thing I'm going to list is that iOS is still a mishmash of features that are even more awkwardly executed. Awkwardly? I said that awkwardly, but I think you get my point. The problem isn't that iOS doesn't have good features. The problem is that one is stacked on top of the other, and when they add a new feature, it's like another one breaks or gets shoved to the side or never really gets fixed or addressed. And so problems just continue to stack up, and then you end up with this mystery meat, anything and everything everywhere, working 4 billion different ways, and it's maddening. Honestly, I am able to navigate iOS. It's not that I'm unfamiliar with it or a stranger to it in any way, shape, or form. I understand it, but it's just a series of just not just feature creep. It's just in sore need of being re-architected. The software, not the hardware. I have very few problems with the hardware at all. I can't say that I hate the hardware because I don't. But the software, yeah, I'm definitely on that side of the spectrum, the very much disliking side of the spectrum. Another thing I really don't like, in fact, I hate, I've had tons of accidental miswipes, and the miswipes, I mean, like, I'm trying to invoke the camera, I'm like, am I supposed to slide it? Okay, do I slide it here, but then I press the button, do I press and hold? It's like, I do a gesture, and sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. Or like, even on the home screen, I find myself accidentally swiping the app library over, which you can't turn off at all. I just find myself, and it's not because it's such a big screen, which by the way is something that I love. It's just that the software doesn't know what it's doing, even though it knows what it's doing, because there are so many features that are only unlocked with certain taps or swipes in certain places, and this being a full touchscreen device only exacerbates that problem. So it just feels like the whole thing needs to be reimagined. And I mean, the accidental misswipes or thinking that I'm going to do one thing when in fact something else happens, it continues to frustrate me. Another thing that I really don't like, the camera output. I know, the iPhone has great cameras in cinematic mode. I don't care about cinematic mode. Is it neat? Yes. Is it gimmicky? Absolutely. It's like portrait mode. It's okay, but it's not something that I'm going to use on a regular basis because it's just not always perfect. But then again, that's iOS, not always perfect. So the camera output, I've been testing this against Android devices over the past day, and I'm not that impressed. There have been a few shots that are really, really good, but a lot of shots that are really, really not so good, especially when it comes to HDR. HDR on this device is like non-existent to the point where I thought that I was missing a setting somewhere. Like, I know you can toggle HDR for video, but there's no HDR setting for photos. And there were situations where, whether I'm in the dark with light coming off to the side or in full broad daylight, I mean, I've been sharing these photo images, these samples on my Twitter account, on my Discord server. I put them out there. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I know how to use a smartphone. I know how to use a smartphone camera. But the camera output, the photos themselves, let me put it this way. A Pixel 4 XL from 2 years ago, I believe, can handily beat the camera output of an iPhone 13 Pro Max. So that's not something that I've been liking. The camera output is still very iPhone-y, from the very first shot that I took all the way to the most recent one. Another thing that I don't like, I had to turn off True Tone. Especially when I'm doing something side by side that may not have a True Tone display, my eyes get adjusted to that color, that white balance, and I just found that the True Tone display in certain settings was just way too warm, like incredibly warm. And there's everything about this system is warm. Whether we're talking about default camera output, which by the way you can change with photographic styles. I'm not talking about that being an issue. That's actually something that I like, but I'm not talking about the things that I like right now. The True Tone display, I turned it off and immediately I enjoyed the screen a lot more. I feel that The icons at the top of the screen are chonky. Very, very, very chonky. Like, big time chonky. And I'm not the only person to complain about this. Like, these icons up here, they're the time huge. I'm like, I get it, it's a big screen, but like, why are those so huge and everything else is small? Like, they're big. I don't like that. It just seems to be another level of inconsistency, but surprise, surprise, another level of inconsistency. Speaking of, sloppy animations and transitions rendered just as poorly, but faster, because we got a ProMotion display, and I've noticed same type of chop, same type of slop, maybe not the same kind of drop frames, because there are certain places that are more fluid, and I'm not talking about animations that are not yet optimized for ProMotion. I'm not talking about the 60 frame per second animations. I'm talking specifically about what should be a smooth transition isn't, because at the end, it like something pops, like, or something changes. Like, I've noticed this anomaly in Mail, I've noticed it in FaceTime, I've noticed it in the Finder, I've noticed it, or whatever they call it, the Springboard. I've noticed it in several different places, and that's something that really throws me off, because my smartphone experience is not driven by the hardware, it's driven by the software, and so the software continues to frustrate me. Another thing that I'm going to say this, and I know this is going to upset a few people, the notch. The notch is silly. This thing, this is, what is up? No, this is up, but come on, really? It's just silly. At this point, it's silly. Maybe 4 years ago, or however long it was, we could say, well, they needed to do X, Y, and Z. Really? Really? Because, they didn't have to. And when I was testing this, because the reason for this notch, the whole thing was Face ID, Face ID, Face ID, Memoji. Well, okay, I don't care. I did an emoji. I'm good to go. Like, this is a gimmick, okay? So, I'm out and doing the photography and everything. I'm able to unlock my Android device with a thumbprint. Boom, boom, I'm in. Or I'm taking the picture. But then I needed to unlock the device, and I had to take my mask off, or I had to actually key in my code, because this thing doesn't have Touch ID! Because apparently they can put it in some devices, but not others? I don't know. I feel that that's just hubris on Apple's part at this point. So, it's another thing that frustrates me. Can't do anything with the power button, and I mean this in the sense that you get used to certain ways of a more efficient way of interacting with your device. And most Android devices have the ability for you to like double click the power button and immediately launch the camera app or some other kind of app. And that makes it so easy as opposed to just, as I was mentioning earlier, futzing around with this camera button, right? Like, I press it and then it opens. See, when I figure it out, then it works. But like, then sometimes I'll do it again, and if I move my hand the wrong way, then it won't open. So you gotta like hold it perfectly still, and that's the gesture issue I was talking about. But it's just easier, far more efficient, than if I'm pulling this out of my pocket, I go double tap and the camera's open. Can't do that with this. Like, it just doesn't. There's no option to do it that way. So honestly, that's something that kind of I dislike. I dislike that I can't launch the camera more easily than Apple has made it. Another thing that I really dislike, iMessage is an absolute nightmare. And I know some people out there are like, well, I use iMessage. Good for you. That's amazing. I hope you're proud of yourself using that software. Cool. You're not me. So, I have a problem with it. It's klutzy. It's cluttered. It was, I'm not even saying frustrating to use. It's a mess of stuff. And this is the problem I'm getting back to from the very top. It's just one thing got piled on top of another, and then this changed, and this changed, and it just stacked to the point where, start over! Please start over. And I know so many people don't want me to start this video over again. There's a reason I did a separate video talking about the things that I like about the iPhone, because believe you me, there is a list of that. The last thing that I really dislike about the iPhone is the apologists. I'm going to say it. There are some people out there who will bend over backwards. They will contort themselves just to come up with some excuses to why Apple's doing this or why Apple's doing that. And I don't mean reasons. Like, let Apple talk about themselves. But don't just sit there and say, well, the reason the notch is there is this, and the reason the software button there is this, and the reason why the features get piled up in this is this. No! If there are problems, they are problems. Call them problems. Squeaky wheels get grease. Like, if you just keep saying, we'll take whatever you get, you're never going to get a better product! So those, in a nutshell, are my top 10. I have to limit it, of the things that have frustrated me about using the device that I'm going to be keeping, the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And maybe you feel the same way that I do. Maybe you feel less passionate.